set. Can you do this?
Idam Guru Ratnamandalakam Niryatayami Sunde Chiranam Soki Choknama Utanju Vardu Gatni Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinye Gipe Sonampi Rola Benji Sangye Jupaisho Sangye Chiram Soki Choknama Chanchu Vardu Gati Kyalsuchi Dagi Jinye Gipe Sonampi Rola Benji Sangye Jupaisho Sangye Chiram Soki Choknama Chanchu Vardu Gati Kyalsuchi Dagi Jinye Gipe Sonampi Rola Benji Sangye Jupaisho.
So we'll start again with meditation. And I've been thinking about this. I almost hesitate to do this meditation because it's not a meditation I've done in a very long time. And you may be wondering why on earth we're doing it. But it's very relevant to a philosophical point that's going to come up in our discussion this afternoon. And I want you to have an experience of it for that reason. But it's also a really powerful meditation that we don't do much in this lineage. So, as I say, not having any fresh transmission of it myself, but only knowing it through the textual references here, and with the awareness this is uncomfortable to do. Like this preface so far? We'll go there, okay? And allow yourself to go there. This is about imagination. This is about actually letting parts of your imagination that you don't usually like to elicit come up. And you may get some very vivid images. And as I say, philosophically, the point is the vividness of the images. We want to know what vivid images look like in our mind. But they're vivid images that have a purpose. And I won't really tell you what that purpose is yet, but I think it'll be pretty obvious as we do the meditation. So we'll still start with, preparatory stages to get into meditation. So please find a comfortable posture. For those of you who were here this morning, try to slip right back into the end of your last meditation. For those of you just joining us, try to feel the energy of our collective meditation together. and slip into that. For all of us, notice how your body's talking to you right now. And try to find the balance of energies. Groundedness combined with alertness, upright readiness. Settling the body in its natural state. And then begin to release your inner speech, that monologue we live with, by following the breath, letting it become smooth and non-conceptual. And right now I just mean not talking. Allow the awareness of sensations of the breath throughout your body to fill your mind without having to say anything about them. Relaxing into that experience. And then finally note the quality of your mental awareness. You can open your eyes slightly and simply rest in the present moment. Letting go thoughts of the past, the future. Noting the quality of simply being aware, quiet, still, and clear. Try for a moment to fathom how this very experience of being aware, so utterly natural, is itself caused. And in turn relies on many other things. Each moment of awareness couldn't be there without the moment before it. But as soon as you are aware of anything, whether it simply be your visual field, or the thoughts arising, sounds and so on, the experience of being aware of anything is also caused by the thing. And yet, even more deeply than that, how is the very fact of being aware as this being in this body, in this world, created moment by moment, from the energy of action, the residue from the way that consciousness reached out and latched onto its objects in the past. Recall the feeling of your teacher deep within your heart. How that teacher was an embodiment of enlightened qualities which are infinitely beyond anything you can really perceive or fathom in this world. And ask for help now. To find what it is that you are hanging on to so hard, so firmly, that actually keeps you rooted in this world, that stops you from seeing this world dissolve in your heart. And ask your teacher for the blessing to experience, even in an imagined way, the coarse and gross impermanence of this world as a realm. How nothing here will last, much less our own bodies or minds. And then entering the world of the imagination, letting awareness exercise its creative capacity in a very direct and malleable way. Let your perspective withdraw from this place, and as if you could go out into outer space somewhere and look upon this planet as a whole. Almost as we did last night, from the point of view of compassion. Just try to take in the vast problems that people are facing in every city, in every country, spread around this globe. You don't need to have a particular perspective in mind, just know the whole planet, however it arises for you. Aware of the comings and goings, the illnesses, the fear, beings born, beings dying, billions upon trillions of them, in the animal world, in the insect world, in the human world. Just try to fathom all that is happening on this planet at any given moment. And the countless forms of consciousness in which those experiences occur. And then, as though you could fast forward time, see how at a certain point all the living beings who are alive on the planet today will have died and moved on. And so focusing now just on that fact, you can start to see those bustling cities, roadways, houses, filled with dead people. It doesn't need a natural catastrophe or a war. If you just thought about it, all those houses will be filled with the memories of dead people eventually. But without adding all the new life we generally see, start to see what the world would be like if all you saw was the passing of things. And you can start to see how many buildings fall into disrepair, fields turn brown from drought, water levels rise, whole sections of continents drift off into the sea. Perhaps there are some catastrophic weather patterns that make whole areas infertile. And allowing your imagination to play, almost allowing the child who at some level enjoys imagining a vision of desolation, see the whole world begin to be covered with corpses and skeletons. Decay. Without renewing anything. Again, the decay happens. We just don't notice it so much because there's always some other kind of birth going on, some other kind of renewal. But for now, just focus on the decay. Monuments falling into disrepair. Museums, libraries, dissolving into dust or flame. What trace is there of all that went before? 1,000 years pass. 1,000,000 years pass. The world is getting hotter and hotter. Nothing can grow anymore. Finally, all the continents are scorched. No more green plants. The water patterns have changed entirely. And there are no more living beings. The sun burns hotter and hotter until the waters, the oceans evaporate. And the whole planet disappears in a ball of fire. If you have any remaining sense of being a person sitting here, you can also enact the whole meditation on your own body, decaying, becoming a skeleton. Eventually, the bones turning to dust. And everything being withdrawn into the energetic space between your eyebrows. And then focus for a moment on the sheer absence of form. anywhere, in all the directions of space. And then in a single instant, open your eyes and pop back in this room. That was meant to be abrupt. There's a reason for the abruptness at the end, because it's just important in certain meditations when you've created an imagined world, a sacred world, to know how you can go there instantaneously. So it's lovely to plant the seed for being able to see how quickly we can switch worlds based on our mind. How quickly our mind can actually take us out of a world and how quickly it can send us back into one. Just take a moment for feedback. Did anybody feel anything in that? Did it take you somewhere? Shouldn't be anything so surprising about the ideas in it, but we don't usually like to think about it very much, right? So now you have a taste of the meditation called Midukpe Tingenzin, or the concentration on that which is unpleasant. There are many ways to do it. I'm sure I didn't do it entirely traditionally, but I hope in a form that was accessible. Actually, it's a good meditation to do if your mind is ever really agitated. And you just need to get real and get some perspective, like on the path. You don't want to actually end there, and we're not ending there, so I don't feel too bad. I mean, I do feel kind of bad, actually, leaving you there. But we're in this room. We're in Dharma. We just took refuge. There's hope. But it is really good as a preliminary to another kind of meditation. If you wanted to go there and then start to do a compassion meditation, to come back into, you can also rebuild the worlds and put everything back where it was and imagine all the growth and birth and arising. But keeping in that perspective of where it's all going. I mean, this is classic impermanence meditation. As I say, we don't tend to concentrate on it so much. But it's integral to the Buddhist tradition to have a meditation like this. And to simply put things in perspective. But as I say, we'll get to the philosophical reason for it later, and maybe in an hour or so. So to pick up where we left off here, can I just have a show of hands of who wasn't here before? I know 3 of you. Was anybody else who you were here halfway through? Everybody else was here before, right? Okay, so I'll just pick up where we were. But I'll read that final sentence again, just from my own analysis, using the idea of abhisamskara as the way that the mind goes out, latches onto things, and creates a karmic imprint. So the fact that samsaric consciousness itself will continue in a stream relies upon the energy of traces, those habits of turning towards this or that appearance as an object, which leaves a trail of karmic energies that force there to be a mind that keeps perceiving in a way that constantly misperceives but still perceives. And so then in his Tsongkhapa's logic to show why consciousness is dependent, he's invoking this idea, as I said, of if you put a stop to ignorance, then you put a stop to everything that has been constructed on the basis of that ignorance. And because it was something within my own writing that I had used earlier, I want to read for you also a couple verses from the 26th chapter of Arya Nagarjuna's Root Verses of the Middle Way, which express that idea so succinctly. Why, again, in this mode of renunciation, one would even want to put a stop to the traces that create a world which will always end up falling apart. You know, we just did that in that experiential way, but back to the philosophical reasoning, what's wrong with the consciousnesses that are creating, back to this question, a world where everything's going to fall apart eventually? And why is that? And if we gain a kind of renunciation for a world that works that way, how much more motivation would we have to use the creative capacity of mind itself to create a different kind of world that wasn't going to end that way? So Arya Nagarjuna says, the root of the cycle is making traces. This traces is what I'm translating samskara. So like the root of the cycle, he's not even saying ignorance at this point. He's going to the second link. And as I recall, this chapter 26 is on, yes, it is on the 12 links. So he's gone through an entire analysis of the 12 links. And then he says, the root of the cycle is making traces. Therefore, the wise ones make no trace. The unwise is a maker, since he does not, from having seen suchness, know. If to not knowing there is an end, then of the traces there will be no becoming. By understanding that it will cancel ignorance, they meditate on suchness. Since there is an end to both, neither this nor that will come about. It is the only way to end completely those heaps of suffering life. So I tried to allow the translation to be as disjointed grammatically as the Tibetan appears to me. I actually also worked with Sanskrit a little bit for this. So I'll go through it slowly, because I would love for this phrase to haunt you as much as it's haunted me. The root of the cycle is making traces, therefore the wise ones make no trace. The Tibetan for that is Korwetsawa duchete, deche kenam tu miche. By translating samskara as trace, I make it easy to translate this literally, because do miche is don't do the doing that puts together. Do is dupa is to bring together, chepa is to do. So duche is brought together doing, putting together, samskara, and do miche is they don't do the putting together. So by using this traces, then you can say make no trace, which of course we have that phrase of make no trace, don't leave anything in your trail, don't, leave nature untouched. What would it be to have a consciousness that leaves no trace? Because he's talking about the wise ones, he's not talking about obliteration or a lack of consciousness. So the root of the cycle is making traces, therefore the wise ones make no trace. The unwise is a maker. Mike jepoyin. So the one who doesn't understand makes stuff, as in karma. Since he does not, from having seen suchness, know, i.e. he doesn't understand due to having seen suchness. So, yeah, the language is like that in the Tibetan also. He has not seen suchness. She has not seen suchness. So therefore, he or she does not know the nature of reality, and so is unwise, and therefore is a maker. That's the logic that's going on. So the idea of, if you knew reality, you wouldn't make this kind of stuff. You wouldn't make karmic traces. The unwise is a maker, since he does not, from having seen suchness, know. If to not knowing there is an end, then of the traces there will be no becoming. So if there's an end to lack of knowledge, if there's an end to ignorance, then the traces won't turn into anything. Yeah, I'll say again.
Is karmic seeds and traces the same thing?
Virtually. And I'll just make this clear now. There are three main words that get used almost synonymously, but in different contexts. So there's, in Sanskrit, it's samskara, bija, and vasana. Samskara is the putting together, and that's what I'm translating as trace, karmic trace. Bija is definitely seed. That's the easiest one to translate directly as seed. And then there's vasana, which literally means fragrance. And that's what I've translated as tendency, but it's bakchak. You actually know it as the Tibetan word bakchak. So bakchak and vasana are often used interchangeably, but there are cases where you have phrases where they're put together, bija vasana or bakchak isabu, which it's debatable, but I pretty much am understanding as the seed for the tendency. The seeds for the tendencies of ignorance. In the sense that, and almost you have to use the analogy, as if the mind stream has all these seeds in it, but it also is soaked in certain fragrances. And then there are seeds that carry fragrances with them. And it all comes from this flower analogy, because in ancient India, they thought that in the case of something like a sesame flower, that the seed, would stay in the flower and be soaked in the fragrance of the flower, so that when the seed was planted and gave rise to the next generation of the sesame flower, it would have the scent of the previous type of flower because it had been infused in the seed. And so this I did do a bit in March. This whole notion of infusion of a karmic tendency into a seed, and then the seed carries the tendency with it, and when the seed opens, the tendency can assert itself. So that to me is analogically how those two words are relating to each other. But in the texts, often one or the other is used to refer to the whole process. So you can say a tendency opens or a seed opens, and it means essentially the same thing.
And trace, could you say putting together of seeds?
So the word trace comes more from the Abhidharma tradition than the Maidoli tradition. And so for that reason, it doesn't have the same analogies associated with it. The analogy is that of making pots, as in the Wheel of Life. The second link, making pots, putting things together. But functionally speaking, my sense is it's quite similar to the notion of seed being planted. Okay. There are many more complex things about it, which we just don't need to worry about now. As to what's a changing thing, what's an unchanging thing, what's actually made of consciousness, what is an unlinked trace, as in the karmic residue that will give rise to its result, but is not actually conscious as long as it exists. So those kinds of philosophical points, but I don't want to get back down to that now. So I will repeat this. The root of the cycle is making traces. Therefore, the wise ones make no trace. The unwise is a maker, since he does not, from having seen suchness, know. But if to not knowing there is an end, then of the traces there will be no becoming. They won't turn into their result. By understanding that it will cancel ignorance, they meditate on suchness. So they meditate on suchness in order to cancel ignorance. Since there's an end to both, neither this nor that will come about. And it's quite clear to me that the both means the end of both ignorance and traces. And so neither this, I think being consciousness, nor that being the heap of form. That I'm not so sure about now in terms of the context. It doesn't so much matter now. As to what the this nor that refers to. But at any rate, it's either mind and body or, yeah, I'm stuck on that now. I'll get back to you. At any rate, he says, it is the only way to end completely these heaps of suffering life. So coming back to our theme, if the worlds are made of nothing more than conceptions, it would start to make sense that if you could cut off the link of ignorance, you could cut off the worlds that are projected by that ignorance. And likewise, Tsongkhapa, in his praise of dependent origination, it's a very similar theme. I'd just like you to hear some of these different things and let it ring with you. Since there is no way to turn back an inherent nature, so the Buddha stated, that if things had even the slightest bit of a nature in themselves, then it would be impossible ever to go beyond grief, and there would be no turning back to all elaboration. So this is the theme that we left with before, of if something is real, then when ignorance is cleared away, you'll see what's real better. And if suffering consciousness actually existed, then you'd really see the suffering consciousness in all its glory. But if the point is that by seeing reality, suffering, the entire suffering world disappears, and yet you're seeing reality. And Arya sees ultimate reality as it is. And there's no suffering world in that perception. And we're going to get very quickly into the notion of ultimate and deceptive realities. Then there couldn't even have been a consciousness that was really there, seeing ultimate reality, because if it was a suffering consciousness, it would have to be seen for its suffering nature. And so, again, this is Tsongkhapa saying, since there's no way to turn back, no way to stop an inherent nature, the Buddha stated that if things had even the slightest bit of a nature in themselves, then it would be impossible ever to go beyond grief, and there would be no turning back to all elaboration. But of course, we know from the Buddha's teachings, there is a way to go beyond grief, and there is a way to turn back all elaboration. The notion of turning back all elaboration in the sense conceptual elaboration, and the many things that we perceive via conceptual elaboration. And the turning back implies this implosion energetically, literally into the heart. I say literally from the point of view of Vajrayana teachings and prana, and the way that the worlds are actually said to be riding on prana. But philosophically, the notion that things will cease to appear. So to almost continue this play on the word trace, if one were able to identify and overturn the mistaken state of mind, then like waking from a dream and realizing that none of the characters or events in the dream were ever real to begin with, the suffering world would vanish instantly without a trace. But I want to suggest yet a further step, which you won't often hear in a Buddhist context, but it's very related to our initial question of pure and impure consciousness. If it's true that seeing correctly means seeing a total absence of suffering, and if in turn ignorance is a mistaken state of mind, and all 12 links of dependent origination that produce the experience of suffering are based on a misknowing, well, this should be familiar. Then doesn't that suggest that reality is the polar opposite of suffering? and not necessarily simply as an absence. In other words, again, we had that thing of, well, if nirvana is just the absence of mental afflictions, I'm not sure I have anything to look forward to. Or likewise, if emptiness is simply the lack of something that shouldn't be there, that was never there in the first place, is that so, I'm sorry to say that, I'm going to be a little crass, is that so exciting as ultimate reality? Isn't there another way of talking about ultimate reality that has some content to it? Now, in honor of Gentle Kappa, I'm not going to say that ultimate reality has any content to it, because we can't project anything positive onto the simple absence of inherent existence. But insofar as emptiness is empty of any inherent nature, you can't even posit an emptiness without a mind that perceives it. There's never been an emptiness that wasn't perceived. And so at some level, and Vajrayana goes a long way with this, we have to acknowledge that if there's, it's really weird to say this, but if we can say that emptiness was always true, we kind of always have to say that there was a wisdom that perceived it. Or there was always a wisdom that perceived it. And again, that goes back to the question of what could be the cause for the Dharmakaya. It has to be a beginningless state, even though for us, there will be a first moment in which we experience it. So based upon that, we can start to think of emptiness itself as being inconceivable apart from a mind knowing it. It's not the usual way of talking about the emptiness of emptiness, but it is one direction to go with it. And it is one way to talk about the fact that there was, or I'll say the idea, that there was never a time that there was not a Buddha. There was never a time that emptiness, ultimate reality, was not being perceived by some mind. And so to wax theological for a moment, when, as I said the other night, we who are not growing up Tibetan, most of us not growing up in a Buddhist culture, encounter the idea of worlds of suffering and the quite dismal picture that Buddhism can give us sometimes, elaborated by our meditation just now. The question, still based in that notion of, but wait, isn't there a divine being who created everything as good? Can make us ask, that's not fair. Why is it suffering? That's not fair. Who made it that way? Right? We're still, some part of us is still asking that question. And it's integral to this because isn't that what the very verse was about, saying the Buddha saw that it wasn't any of those things explained by the non-Buddhist traditions. And so I need again to read because I don't want to get even the way some past instance of my own mind formulated this wrong. If we take seriously the idea that the whole panoply of suffering worlds is said to be based directly upon a misknowing, it is clear that there was no one, quote, in the know who ever designed or preordained the condition of ignorance and so on in the first place. It's just, you know, this play on knowing and misknowing and in the know. There was no one in the know who said, oh, we're going to make a world made of karma. You know, we've sometimes played with the paradigm or the analogy of karma as a cosmic law, but that almost already implies that somebody made the law. And we were talking the other night at dinner about, well, how is it that ignorance itself could produce the laws of karma, right? And so in this sense, if, as Geshe Michael says, this world is a boo-boo, this world is a mistake, then you can't blame it on anybody. on the other hand, it could point to the idea that whatever is the foundation of reality as it is, or as it might be known perfectly, is not the cause for the reams upon reams of pain. So this explanation should point to the conclusion that whatever is the foundation of reality as it is, if you saw it correctly, or as it might be known perfectly, is not the cause or reason for the reams upon reams of pain. So this is what I find so profound and fascinating about Buddhist thought at both the sutra and the tantra level. We're acknowledging this world of suffering, we're saying it's caused by a mistake, and we're not denying the possibility or the promise that there is a reality that is totally pure, and if we could see it, then a world that's totally perfect could be created on the basis of that correct seeing. So again, we can so easily miss this if only looking at Buddhism from the point of view of the Four Arya Truths presentation, where it seems like the first premise is reality is suffering, the world is suffering. No, the world is suffering because we aren't seeing the world. We're not seeing reality. We're not seeing the source of reality. We're not even seeing the source of our own reality correctly. And so again, if there were such a wisdom, even if you don't posit that such a wisdom is without beginning, but I feel confident enough to posit that if reality exists, there's always been a mind that has known it somewhere. And therefore that mind can create perfect worlds and always has. So that if at some level we can stop the flow of our own ignorance, the creative capacity of our own minds at root would be unleashed to be what a mind could have been from eternity, what awareness could have been from time without beginning, if there were no mistake. And we've used that notion of the stopping the flow before. I think many of you have probably heard even the notion of the reverse order of the 12 links, like you stop this, you stop this, you stop this, and the faucet won't go anymore. Does that sound familiar to people? That you have to turn off the valves so that the stream of suffering will stop. But again, we have to be subtle with that, because the mind-only school could use that explanation also, and yet still be thinking of the mind that you have to stop as having some reality of its own as long as it's existing. So there's a way of thinking of the suffering world as having its own reality, and you have to stop the causes of that reality so that another reality can manifest. But the possibility for instantaneous transformation that is essential to Vajrayana practice would get stuck somewhere. Again, if there were a mind that was established through a nature of its own as being the mind of sentient being or the mind of suffering being. So we have to not only think about planting the causes to stop the flow of suffering, which is great as a beginner and intermediate teaching, but we have to get to the place where we realize that the perception of there being a mind that's ignorant at all is a projection of an ignorant mind. And that the conception of a mind as ignorant is also a conception that is part of these three realms that are produced only by a mind that is produced in turn by karma's traces, which is produced by ignorance.
saying we have 2 lines?
I've been going in that direction. Yeah. We're not quite there yet, but I won't. How do I want to say it? There's the mind produced by karmic traces, and there's the extremely subtle mind that could be posited as the foundation of all samsara and nirvana, as it is in Vajrayana and Dzogchen specifically. I'm dancing around it right now because I'm not actually here to give that teaching or qualified to give that teaching. But I'm trying to help you see how it could be derived from the sutra teachings themselves. See, in a sense, how it's the underlying theme or implicit conclusion to all these things about how one could even reach nirvana, much less total Buddhahood. So I'm going to continue into a passage that, again, should be familiar to you from ACI 5. But this is in my translation. As I say, I had to do it over again because of academic purposes. But it might, again, give you just a little different perspective on what is the same passage. And it's the commentary on the very verse that we started with from Chandakirti. By mind itself are the worlds of living beings arranged, and by mind itself are the immense variety of worlds that are the vessels set forth. It is stated that every wanderer, without exception, is born from karma. If you abandon the mind, then even karma would not exist. So here's the commentary, again, a mix of Jetsakapa and Chandakirti. In order to show that the mind is primary, I will explain. On this point, as for the worlds of living beings, the things one finds to be mine come from the karma and mental afflictions amassed by one's own mind. As for the immense variety of worlds that are the vessels, these are arranged or produced from the karma amassed in common by the minds themselves of only those living beings who inhabit them. This goes for every farthest reach of the vessels, from the disk of wind all the way up to the heaven of the form realm called below none. So again, this explicit statement that the worlds that are the vessels are produced from the karma amassed in common. And for anyone who, how do I say, I constantly want to dispel the misconception that any individual's karma is single-handedly creating an entire world. There is such a thing, and according to all these scriptures, and again, this is in ACI Course 5, of our collective karma overlapping in such a way that we can perceive a shared world. Now, in this regard, the various intricate patterns on the face and so forth of a peacock and the like are produced only from the karma that is unique to each of those living beings. So that's saying that the color of my eyebrows is coming from my karma. Whether you like that or not could certainly be a result of karmic propensities in the mind of each person. But this is explicitly saying, if it's talking about the peacock's feathers, it can be talking about a human being's hair color. Is a result of karmic propensities that produced this particular body. And I find that idea exciting, the idea that we can almost get a window onto the karmic world that is each individual through the way their karma is manifesting in a particular moment. And as we know, very impermanent, and not the whole of that being by any means, because as and even this meditation would have shown, this meditation would have shown us, if you watch any being's mind stream long enough, it's going to go through countless transformations. And I think a few days ago we did some meditation on to meditate on Tonglen or on real bodhicitta is not to see any individual as what they are at a particular time or place, but in the sense of helping people and being able to get a window into who is this person now. We know that physical bodies don't tell us much, but I think there's still a beauty to acknowledging that the extent to which we say this person, my perception of this person is coming from me, is not to say that this person's karma is coming from me. Because that's not what this says. And that's not what Jetsakapa says in many, many different places. And I don't think it's ever what Geshe Michael has intended. When he says he's coming from you or she's coming from you, I would add the what do you call it? That application of the distinction of the thing to be denied, or here the application of the distinction of the thing to be affirmed. And Jetsakapa used the logic that if Chandakirti used it once or twice, then he meant it every time. So I personally will take the liberty or dare to apply that to my Holy Lama's own speech and say, because he's explained your perceptions are for you and somebody else's perceptions are for them, and explicitly stated how everybody gets their own perspective, it would feel incumbent upon me to say, okay, if there's a teaching where it says you created that person, you add for you, which means your perceptions of that person. It can't mean, by all the logic I've ever seen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that your karma created that person's karma. Because then that would mean, as here Geshe Rinchen saying, did everybody become one mind stream? He used to say this when he'd ask a question and one person would answer, and he'd say, do you all have the same mind stream? Because he actually wanted everybody to answer. So he'd be like, does that one person get to answer for everybody? So likewise, if suddenly everybody's karma and therefore their bodies and their hair color, etc., came from me, then what? Is everybody just one mind stream? And the everyone becoming one mind stream is used as an absurd consequence over and over again in middle way logic. It's not acceptable. You can't say everybody became one mind stream. We're interconnected for sure. We are not absolutely separate for sure. But it doesn't make sense to speak of the individuality of sentient beings with their collection of karma and say they're all one mind stream, because then the whole idea of karma falls apart. It's karma that creates the experience of being a person or being an individual. Did you still have a question on that, or go ahead?
You made the distinction of your karma not creating a world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I say collectively, yes.
No, but first you said collectively, mm-hmm, that you create the world, but then you said by no means is one person's karma creating a world on its own, I guess.
On its own, yeah.
And when you meant a world on its own, you meant including the beings in it? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, at that moment I meant the vessel, and vessel specifically in these texts refers to the elements that lack feeling. So, i.e. the material universe.
So that's where I got hung up. So if that's the case, then what's the difference between creating that vessel versus creating this vessel, the eyebrow vessel, or the penis?
Oh, really good point. Theoretically, a single sentient being could create a